The DeWeerts, whenever we go on vacation, we're kind of like water people. We like to be around water, and many years ago, we were actually down in the Cape location, and we decided that we would go to the beach. And so Jen and our little guy, at that point, he's still our youngest, but he was really little at this point. Paxton and myself decided to go to the beach, and so, you set up your little lawn chairs, and Paxton loves to get into the waves, and he was in the waves, and we're playing in the waves, and all of a sudden, after about maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, I noticed this, that we had literally drifted about 50 yards down the beach from where we had entered and where our our beach chairs were. And I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. It must be in some invisible current. And so I grabbed Paxton, we walked out onto the beach, and we walked back up like 50 yards, and we re-entered into the water where we originally had. And then in about another 5 or 10 minutes, we found ourselves another 50 yards down the beach. And we did that over and over again. We had to get in the water, and then we'd get out of the water, and we'd walk back up the beach, and we'd re-enter the water, and we just did it over and over again. And that night, Jen actually looked at me, and she said something. She goes, you know what? That's the way life is. You step into something, and over time, drift naturally sets in. And when she said that, I thought, that's a sermon. You don't even notice it, right? I mean, it happens with almost everything. It happens in our relationships. You enter into a relationship, and before you know it, drift happens, right? Or you get into work, and drift happens. It happens in worship. It happens in friendships. After a while, drift happens, and you think, wow, I haven't talked to my good friend for a long time. Most importantly, it happens in our relationship with God. And drift can happen even in our faith. And we have to put forth much effort once the drift happens to get out of the drift or the current and to re-enter into the relationship with God the way we once did. Maybe that's why the Bible says that we have to have a childlike faith, right? And I want to talk about 2 areas specifically in our relationship with Jesus where drift can happen. And today I want to talk about defeating that drift. And you say, why are we talking about drift? It's like we're only 1 month into the calendar year. Well, the reason why is, I guess I have a question. How are those New Year's resolutions going? Right? Drift happens. We have all of these great aspirations, January 1 through January about maybe 14, and then after a while, it's like drift happens. It's unintentional. It's unnoticeable most of the time. And so today I want to talk about a couple of stories, and I want to talk about the drift that naturally happens in our relationship with God and how we can defeat that drift, or at least try to avoid, okay? First story takes place in Luke chapter 10. Famous story. If you've grown up in church at all or been around church, you've probably heard this story before. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village. A woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her and said this, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. This is a famous story of 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And I'm just going on the record, and I'm going to say something that maybe you would not expect your pastor to say about this story. Because the story's about Martha, who's in the kitchen, and she's sweating, and she's cooking. And you got Mary, who's sitting at the feet of Jesus as he is talking. These two sisters that could not be more different. And I'm going to say something that maybe you wouldn't expect your pastor to say, but this story really bothers me and I don't like it. I don't like this story at all. And this is the reason why, is because every time I read the story and every time I've ever heard this story preached, it's always, Martha, you're working, this isn't good, you should be sitting at the feet of Jesus like your sister Mary. And I don't like that because I run a church. And I will tell you, if our church was only full of Marys, nothing would get done. It bothers me. It bothers me. This is a little tongue-in-cheek, what I'm about ready to say, all right? But I've said this multiple times to my staff. It's like, I don't want just people that have good hearts. I need people here that get crap done, all right? And I realize that some of you are like going, oh, can you say that? I don't know if I can say it or not. I'm saying it, okay? You know, there's Martha. Martha's like cooking the meal. She's getting stuff done. Somebody has to prepare the meal. She's probably thinking to herself, you go sit with Jesus, Mary. Go do that. Go color in your Bible and journal. Do all those things. I'll be over here. I'll be putting out the fires in the kitchen. I'll be setting the table. I'll be stirring the sauce. I'll be doing all these things. And listen, Mary, when you get hungry, after you've sat at the feet of Jesus, after you've done that, you can come eat the food I cooked. In a church, in a family, in a business, there must be problems that are solved and issues that are addressed and stuff that needs to get done. And here's the thing, the Marthas, they think to themselves, well, okay, you go have your moment with Jesus, but somebody's got to do all this. Like, somebody has to get to the business to unlock it and turn on the lights and then do the accounting and pay the bills. And someone in the family has to empty the garbage and clean the dishes and vacuum the floors and mow the lawn. And someone in a church has to show up at 6 a.m. and put the cones out in the parking lot and make sure that the sanctuary is vacuumed and the lights are turned on and the worship has been practiced and the EQ of the sound. See, there's all of the work, right? It's like, yeah, you just show up to church. But somebody had to unlock the doors and clean the windows and make sure that the kids' areas are sterilized so that the funky crud doesn't all of a sudden become the petri dish that everybody gets sick from, right? You see, if I had to be honest with you and just be a little candid and probably a little maybe too transparent, I would say this. I have a hard time with this story because my personality is like Martha's. And I find that in life, this is not maybe cut and dry, but I find in life there's two types of people. There are the Martha type people and there are the Mary type people. And I fall into the Martha category, and that's not good. I'm gonna be honest with you. The reason why I have a problem with this story is because it convicts me every time because I can give into a Martha mindset. And some of us in here can too. And the first distraction I want to talk about today is the one that I fall into a lot, and that is the distraction drift. You say, what is the distraction drift? Well, you look in the ESV, the English Standard Version of this story, and it says this, that Martha was distracted with much serving. Some of us can resonate. Some of you are like Martha, or maybe Jeremy, or others, that you're distracted by all there is to do in life. The responsibilities of the home, the responsibilities of work, the responsibilities of church, And when you are distracted by all there is to do, your relationship with Jesus can suffer. Let me take it another step. It is easier for some of us to work on the problem or the need that is in front of us rather than it is to sit at the feet of Jesus or in the presence of Jesus. It's easier to take care of the problem than to sit in the presence. In fact, we are far more comfortable doing something for God than taking the time to be with God. And if you are one of those people that can fall into this drift, you may be silently thinking something. You might be thinking, God will bless my lack of presence because of my abundance of work. Got quiet for some of us in here. In other words, my grind will attract his grace. And I'm not sure that is right or the best. In fact, we can dress up this drift of distraction with a noble facade. We can Marthas, the people that give into the Martha temperament, they can feel a little bit like martyrs. You know what I mean? Like we can become prideful thinking, well, we're really carrying the freight here in the house. We're the ones carrying the weight in this church. We're the ones getting stuff done at the business. And here's where the enemy is super crafty with people who give into a Martha mindset. The enemy does this, and here's the reason. Many of us who get caught in the distraction drift are the ones everyone relies on. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. In fact, whether people intentionally or unintentionally do it, if you're a Martha, people actually will treat you like a Martha and give you a lot to do. Like this isn't in my notes, but we know this in our homes, we know it in our churches, we know it also in our businesses or in society. There are certain people, if you give a task to, you know it's gonna get done. And there's other people that you give a task to and you're kind of like, what are the Vegas odds on this one? Right? So what do you do when you need a task done? You go to the people that are gonna get it done. And for those of us that are Marthas, this becomes where the enemy becomes crafty because it actually worsens our drift. Because you get things done, you're in the kitchen cooking, Martha. You're preparing the meal. And when it comes time to get more work done, who do they go to? They look around, well, Martha will get it done. So they give you even more. See, some of you, I'm talking your language right now, right? And you're thinking, oh man, that is me. Now, I do not think in this story, and I've studied it a lot, I don't think that Jesus is actually reprimanding Martha for her work ethic or telling her not to do the work. That's not what's going on here. What Jesus is driving at is this, he says this, Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. So what is the portion? Like, what is he talking about? She's chosen the good portion. Well, you gotta actually go back and you look in the Old Testament, in the book of Psalms. And there's some verses there that talk about a portion. And let me read one of them. It is actually here out of Psalms 73. It says, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. There's about 5 verses in the book of Psalms alone that talk about the portion of God. In other words, portion is this. It means the protection of God, that God is your source, and God is your identity. He is your portion. So therefore, what I think Jesus is saying to Martha is this, your protection is not your work, Martha. And also, your source is not your work, Martha. And your identity is not your work. Martha. Jesus is not saying that Martha should not work hard. What Jesus is saying is that Martha has become distracted by allowing the work to replace relationship. Thus, her identity is now in her work. Her work is her worship, which it can be, but it has become unhealthy. Doing has become more important to Martha than being. Martha has drifted down the beach, and she needs to get out of the water and re-enter into relationship where she once was. Now, I know some of you here, as I'm talking, you're thinking, I really hope my husband is listening to this. Or, I hope my friend is listening. Or maybe I hope my wife is. You're thinking right now of somebody. You're thinking, I hope this is their message. I hope they're really hearing what that pastor is preaching right now. Well, now let me flip the coin. Let me talk to the Marys in the room. Because there are two different stories here, two different types of drift. The first is the Martha drift, but the second drift is found actually in another story. It's a little bit later. It's in John chapter 12. Same people. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served. Okay, here, she's still in the kitchen. But something has shifted in her heart by this point. See, she's still in the kitchen working, but she no longer has allowed work to be her identity. So anyway, she served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him, capital H, meaning Jesus, at the table. Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made of pure nard, it says, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. But Judas Iscariot, it says, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, meaning he's going to betray Jesus, said this, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii given to the poor? He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, in other words, he was the treasurer of the disciples, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said this, leave her alone so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with you, but you do not always have me. Okay, this is a very different story, but I want to talk to the Marys now in the room. Nard was a very expensive, fragrant oil, okay, back in Jesus' day. It was actually imported from northern India. You could have a pound of nard or this ointment, and it was actually, to buy it was equivalent to one working person's wages. All right. It's pretty for an entire year, okay? So here's the thing. It was like many people would buy this nard as a retirement fund, because back then they didn't have Social Security. They didn't have 401ks. They didn't have IRAs or anything like that. And so if you were to actually want to retire, you would buy these jars of nard, which would be the equivalent of one working person's wages for an entire year. And you would save them, and then you'd sell them later on in life, and that's the money you would live off of. And so the other Gospels actually tell this story, and it says that Mary not only anointed his head, but also his feet and his head. In other words, both the oil was put on his head, Jesus' head, and his feet. And then she took her hair and unbound her hair and began to wipe Jesus' feet with her hair. Now, this is very unorthodox in this day, because Jewish ladies would rarely in public ever take down their hair. This was a sign of great humility, not only taking down her hair, but on top of it, taking her hair and using it to anoint Jesus' feet with this very expensive nard. In other words, she's giving up the equivalent of 1 year's wages in this moment. I mean, this is insane. So what happens? Well, there's pushback immediately. Judas is like, whoa, wait a minute. Why are you doing something so extravagant and excessive? That's what Judas is basically saying. Now, before we throw Judas completely under the bus, and he should be thrown under the bus, but before we throw him completely under the bus, let me say this. Every other disciple in the room was thinking it too. They just weren't carnal enough to say anything. In other words, everybody in the room is shocked. Literally taking thousands, and in our current currency and economy, tens of thousands of dollars, and at that moment, in a sense, wasting it. There were a lot of people in the room that were like, whoa, what is going on here? Now, Christian tradition basically says that the same Mary that was sitting at Jesus' feet is the same Mary in this story. We believe that to be true, although we don't know it as it being 100% true, but we're pretty darn sure it's the same Mary. So assuming it is, why did she do this? Well, because Mary had spent time at Jesus' feet. Unreasonable sacrifice didn't feel extreme, it actually felt normal. All right, now, you sit there and you say, well, I thought you were going to talk to Mary. Well, I am, because here's the thing. Mary's in the room. As you have rightly sat in the presence of Jesus, the Mary in the Bible here gives us an example of what we are to do. And the second drift that a lot of times we can fall into as individuals is the drift of reasonableness. In other words, only doing what's reasonable. I'm gonna just sit at the feet of Jesus. I'm gonna be safe here. It's comfortable to a certain degree. I'm just gonna get poured into. In fact, I just wanna get poured into. I wanna go to church, I just wanna be poured into. Just bless me, Pastor. I really hope today's message blesses me. I hear this a lot in culture nowadays in America. It's like, well, you know what, I don't go to that church anymore because I just wasn't being fed. As if the only reason you go to church is to be fed. In other words, we can get into this little trap of reasonableness that the only reason I go to church is so that it blesses me. It really is dressed up as consumerism. You heard the testimony earlier about serving. It's like, well, I'll let somebody else get here at 6 a.m. and put the cones in. Martha, where are you at? Are you gonna clean the kids' area? And instead, we want to just be blessed. So here's the thing, there's this book. It's a great book. In fact, if you are a business leader, I think you should read this book. It's not a Christian book, but it's based on a lot of Christian principles. It's called The Power of Moments. It's by Chip and Dan Heath, their brothers. It is a fantastic book. It's probably one of the top 5 leadership books I've ever read in my entire life. And in it, they have this quote: beware of the soul-sucking force of reasonableness. In other words, when you allow reasonableness to eclipse risk and sacrifice, you settle for a life of less. Mary did something very unreasonable here. She didn't just sit at Jesus' feet. She literally risked safety, security, her future. She was taking her life savings, and the minute you open up that jar of nard, it becomes useless, or I would not say useless. It becomes, in a sense, the value of it goes away. And she poured it onto Jesus' head and feet. It was profoundly full of risk, worship, and humility, this action that she had. And I would just say this, for some of us, in life in general, we are playing it too safe right now. Mary's act of worship echoes what King David said in the Old Testament as he said this: I will not give to the Lord a sacrifice that costs me nothing. Now, keep that quote up there, because here, I want you to look at that again. I will not give to the Lord a sacrifice that costs me nothing. That denotes there are some sacrifices that don't cost you. Did you catch that? That sometimes we can look like we're sacrificing and we're really not. Sometimes it can look like we're really taking a risk for Jesus. We're stretching our faith. We're getting out there. We're doing something, stepping into our fears, out of our comfort zone. And really, we're not. Because reasonableness makes us believe three things, three lies. The first one is that we should find balance in life. Like I want to live a reasonable life. Work-life balance. That's a lie. I'll talk about that in a moment. I know some of you, I'm like literally blowing it up because you've actually, for your business, you've gone to seminars where they told you to find a work-life balance. Good luck finding that. That's a unicorn, by the way. Secondly, another lie is that we should live by our feelings. Reasonableness means like, well, I don't want to live unreasonable, so I'm going to live by my feelings. I'm going to live by what I feel is going to bring comfort or safety. The third one is this, that we should obsess about what is best for me. When you live reasonable, it means that you're obsessing for really on what is best for me. Now, these are three lies that are super prevalent in our society right now. I'm actually going to be confronting right now cultural things, and you're going to have a hard time with what I say. And the reason why is because, quite honestly, I believe you've been indoctrinated by culture. And these things feel so right. And there is some truth in all three of them. These things are not wholesale wrong. There is truth and goodness in all three of those statements. However, I want to remind you, the best lie is 90% true. So the first one, the balance lie. I need to find balance in life. I am not saying that you work 80 hours a week and neglect your family. That's not what I'm saying. But a friend of mine, Kerry Newhoff, who's a church leadership guy, he said it this way, in our culture, the word balance has become synonymous with mediocrity. Show me a person who has changed the world who's balanced. Show me a person that has made a difference in your life that is balanced. Most people who have accomplished significant things are not balanced. They are passionate. It's not about being balanced, it's about being passionate. They're passionate about their calling, they're passionate about their family, they're passionate about their purpose, they're passionate about Sabbath, they're passionate about working hard. See, great things are rarely accomplished by people who strive for balance and safety. Let me give you an example. Was Martin Luther King Jr. balanced? Was the Apostle Paul balanced? Is Mary in this story balanced? Was Jesus balanced? No. We follow passionate people. We don't follow balanced people. We admire people who are passionate about life, their calling, their relationships, their health, and life's mission. We don't follow safe people. We follow risky people, right? So why are we trying to be balanced? Again, I'm not saying that you work your brains out and you neglect everybody. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we follow passionate people. How about the feelings lie? Oh, this one's a biggie, right? There is a preoccupation in our culture with what we feel. In fact, I would say this, I'm no expert on it, but I have done a little bit of research. I would say this, no culture in human history has had to reassure itself so much and so frequently that they are okay. Like our culture constantly has to look in the mirror. You are somebody, you're okay. You are somebody, you're okay. You are somebody, you're okay. There's no other culture in human history that's had to do it as much as we do. Now listen, I'm not talking about going through difficult times that are extreme. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is our culture's obsession with being safe and comfortable and okay. I love what Lisa Turkhurst said. She said, feelings are indicators, they're not dictators. In other words, they are an indicator. Feelings are something we should pay attention to, but feelings should never lead our choices. People who live lives of significance don't allow feelings to dictate their choices. The choices bring the right feelings someday. How about the third lie? The what is best for me lie. Well, let me just say this in short. Following Jesus is not safe. It's not safe. It's not reasonable. It's not stable. In fact, it's the opposite. It's risky. Jesus basically says it this way, that every day you die to yourself. It isn't about keeping yourself safe. It's about dying to yourself. It's the opposite. In fact, it's a faith walk. It's not comfortable. It's constant surrender. I will tell you, in over 35 years of following Jesus, most of the time, I'm uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable, I'm uncomfortable. The Holy Spirit makes me uncomfortable. I embrace confusion. You have to embrace hardship. You have to embrace sacrifice. You have to embrace taking your cross up daily. And yet, it is the best way to live. It is the best way to live. I know it's the opposite. This is where I know you're gonna be like, this doesn't make sense, I don't like it. I liked the Martha talk. Quit talking about Mary, right? Well, in Luke chapter 14, verse 25, it says this. Now great crowds accompanied Jesus, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. What? Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. This is Jesus. What do you mean? Now let me, that word hate in there, that bothers me and it bothers you. I have to hate my parents, I have to hate my family, I have to hate my spouse. What? No. The Aramaic word that we translated into English as hate, it's a bad translation. The Aramaic is what Jesus' language was when he was preaching this. So he preached in Aramaic, okay? And what that word hate means in Aramaic, it means to love less. In other words, if you don't love everything less than him, you cannot be a disciple. That's what he's saying. And so here's the thing. It's not about hating people. It's about saying, I love Jen. But guess who I love more than Jen? Jesus. That's what it's saying. All right, and guess what? Jen loves me. But you know who she loves more than me? Jesus, my dog. I mean, no. See, what Jesus is getting at there is he's going, you got to love everything less, including yourself. Yeah, you can love yourself, but less than you love Jesus. And as we close, let me just real quickly FedEx to you. If you give into this drift, if you get into the current and you don't ever get out of it, you just allow that drift to take you, Martha, and that drift to take you, Mary, this is what's gonna happen. Martha, lack of presence will result in lack of purpose. You will work, Rihanna, okay? Some of you got that. And you're not gonna be satisfied, all right? You will put energy and work into things, and you're gonna find out why you're gonna forget why you're doing it. You're gonna feel like you're on a hamster wheel. You're working. You're gonna feel taken advantage of. You're gonna be dissatisfied because work is a horrible master. You're gonna find yourself doing projects and accomplishing to-do lists, and yet disconnected in your heart from others, and from most of all, Jesus, the people that even Jesus wants you to live, and you're gonna get angry about it. You'll get angry. You're gonna be like, all I'm doing is working, I'm in this kitchen, and I'm cooking, and Mary's over here. And you'll think the goal is just to get the job done, and then it'll be another job. And then Mary, if you get into the drift of reasonableness and you don't get out, then this is what's going to happen. Lack of sacrifice will result in lack of purpose.